This is the brand new 2022 MacBook Air that features the M2 chip. I've had it for about 2 weeks and I'm here to answer the question, is it worth it? What's up everybody, I'm Seth Fowler and in today's video I'm going to give you guys sort of a consumer style review of the brand new MacBook Air M2. So this is actually my wife's computer. I told her when I first picked it up, hey, give me 2 weeks, let me review it, and she said, all right, begrudgingly, but still, she said all right, so I appreciate that, thank you so much. And over the last 2 weeks, I've had a lot of time to play with this computer. I've done a lot of Photoshop on this computer, I've done a bunch of web browsing, and some general tasks that I think most people who are picking up MacBook Airs will do. And at this point, I feel ready to give you guys my thoughts on the brand new 2022 redesign of the MacBook Air. So the first thing that you probably noticed about the brand new MacBook Air is that Apple decided to change up the shape and the form factor of this computer. In fact, this computer much more closely resembles the design language of the MacBook Pro from last year, and honestly, I was never a huge fan of the wedge shape, and I'm really happy that they decided to go for a much more rectangular and standard looking design. Now with that being said, this computer is still incredibly thin. In fact, it measures in at around 11 millimeters, which is crazy thin. In fact, it's thinner than the widest point of the original MacBook Air. So while no, this computer doesn't get razor thin towards the end like the previous MacBook Air, it's still a thinner computer overall, which I actually like better. And you know what? While we're on the topic of form factor, I've been incredibly impressed by how easy it is to travel with this device. I've never owned a MacBook Air before today, or I guess before these last 2 weeks, and I honestly never realized how portable this device was. I mean, it really does feel like an iPad. It's crazy. And I mean, it's such a capable computer in such a tiny form factor. Apple absolutely knocked this out of the park. And from what I can tell, this M2 version is just such a huge upgrade over the previous M1 version and, of course, any of the other MacBook Airs that I feel like if you're in the market for a MacBook Air, not to spoil this review, but this is the way to go. In addition to the brand new exterior form factor, you've also got a brand new screen, which is now 13.6 inches. It also features that notch design, which I know some people aren't a huge fan of. I personally don't mind it. I've had it on my MacBook Pro for about a year at this point, and it doesn't bother me at all. I forgot my wife's password. I gotta log in really quick. There we go. And while yes, I guess this notch does encroach on the menu bar a little bit, it's not enough to cause any problems, and I've never had an issue with it at all. Plus, because of the notch, Apple is actually able to put a much larger screen in the same form factor because they have smaller bezels, and I think it looks amazing. The screen itself looks great. It's very high resolution. It looks significantly better than any of the previous MacBook Airs. Obviously, it doesn't look as good as the mini LED that you've got on the MacBook Pros, but at the end of the day, for people who are grabbing this computer, they're probably not going to notice the difference, and you're saving a lot of money by getting a slightly lower end screen that still honestly looks great. Now, in addition to the new physical design of the MacBook Air M2, Apple decided to release some new colors. This time around, you've got 4 colors available on the MacBook Air. You've got the standard silver, you've got space gray, you've got starlight, which is a new gold color, and then of course you've got midnight, which is the brand new dark navy color. So I've heard a lot of rumblings online about this midnight color picking up a lot of fingerprints, and I was hoping that that was just people being overly analytical of the new color of the device, but unfortunately, after having this device for a couple weeks, that is absolutely the case, and it's going to make filming B-roll of this computer a nightmare. And also, somewhat disappointingly, even though this device is blue, it's actually very difficult to see the blue unless you catch it in just the right light. In most lights, it looks like a matte black laptop, which, don't get me wrong, is cool, but I bought a blue laptop and I want to see the blue. I mean, I was taking pictures of this laptop from every angle to try and send my friend a picture of the laptop looking blue, and it was almost impossible. I don't understand why it was so difficult. Obviously, in the studio lights, you can sort of see it when I do this, but it's a very dark blue that is difficult to see. However, I guess that's not really a con for a lot of people because some people just prefer the darker, matter look, which I understand. But for me, as someone who was excited about a dark blue laptop, I'm gonna be honest, I was a little disappointed. But now let's talk about some of the smaller design changes that have taken place on the outside of the device. And the first and most notable is the return of the MagSafe charger. Also, I feel like it's important to note the MagSafe charger comes in a matching color, which I think is so cool, especially in this midnight color. It just looks so sick coming off the side of the computer. Not a big deal, but it's one of those like Apple details that I love. And MagSafe is one of those technologies that I wish Apple had never gotten rid of. It's such a useful thing. The fact that I have my dog running around all the time, knocking over cables and pulling on things, makes it so much better for my devices. In fact, it's happened 3 times since I've had this computer. I'm not joking, it's crazy. But he'll run past the power outlet, pull on the cable, and pull it out of the computer. With previous laptops that I've had, USB-C laptops, he's actually pulled the laptops off the table, and it's caused a lot of problems. This time around though, with the brand new MacBook Air and of course my newer MacBook Pro, I don't have that issue, and I love the fact that I don't have to worry about it. In addition to the MagSafe charger, you've got 2 Thunderbolt USB-C ports, which is nice to have. Kind of wish we had an SD card slot, but you can't ask for everything. And then on the other side of the device, you've got your headphone jack, which is something that I'm surprised that they still put on these laptops. I wouldn't have expected that, especially because they've gotten rid of every other port, but hey, it's still there if you need it. Speaking of audio, the MacBook Air M2 doesn't actually feature any speaker grills, so the audio just kind of comes up through these vents towards the hinge of the laptop. And to be completely honest with you, while they sound fine and they sound better than most other laptops of this size, they don't sound as full or as bassy or even as loud as other MacBook laptops, which makes sense because it's such a small device and you're really only getting sound through here, but it would be nice if we had some slightly better sound. Then again, if you're using this at work, you're probably going to have headphones in anyway, and that of course means that you aren't even using the speakers. So it's not a huge deal. They are absolutely serviceable, and again, they do sound better than most other laptops in this category. Now, of course, if you're working from home, you are going to be using the brand new 1080p webcam, which is significantly better than any of the previous MacBook Airs. However, it's still not incredible, but again, it is serviceable and it's a pretty decent webcam overall. But for Zoom calls and Google Meets, you're absolutely good to go, and in a lot of cases, you might actually have the best webcam there. But now let's talk about one of the most important aspects of this laptop and one of the biggest changes from the previous laptop, its performance with the M2 chip. Now, I'm not incredibly tech savvy or computer savvy, which is crazy to say because this is a tech channel. My main channel is a sneaker channel, but this particular channel is a tech channel. So I'm not really doing a lot of benchmarks on this laptop. I could, but there are better benchmarks out there that are probably more comprehensive than anything that I could do. So because of that, I'm just gonna give you my real world experience. And I've gotta say, from my personal experience, the M2 chip is incredibly fast. For most day-to-day tasks like browsing the web on Google Chrome and having a bunch of Chrome tabs open, to doing some light Photoshop work, to really even some light iMovie editing, the M2 MacBook Air is very capable. However, I will say that anything more intensive than that, like if you're doing some serious video editing like I do on my MacBook Pro, this computer is not going to work for you. Not to say that it physically cannot run those programs, it definitely can, and it will, and it's honestly pretty impressive how much this can handle, but if you are doing some pretty intensive like 4K or 8K video editing, this is not the computer for you. Again though, for Photoshop, you're good to go. For Illustrator, any of the Adobe suite, you should be fine unless it's Premiere. The MacBook Air is genuinely a very capable computer. Something else about this laptop that's definitely important to a lot of you, probably most of you, and also really impressed me is the battery life. Now obviously with this newer, more efficient M2 chip, you're gonna get better battery life and better performance. Now the battery life itself is not gonna be significantly longer, if longer at all, than any of the previous MacBook Airs. You get about 14 hours, at least that's what I got from regular day-to-day using the laptop. So time-wise, it's not longer than the previous MacBook Air, but you are getting more performance out of this computer than you did with the previous version, and you're still getting the same battery life, which I think is very impressive. And it's also very impressive how they fit a friggin' battery this small in this computer to last 14 hours. It blows my mind. Now, the one thing I don't love about this computer when it comes to functionality is the fact that this computer heats up pretty fast. And unfortunately, when it gets really hot, it does thermal throttle a little bit, which means you're gonna lose some performance. Now, the good news is that really only happens when the computer's under very heavy workload, or maybe you have like a million Google Chrome tabs up. So it doesn't happen that often, but keep in mind that this computer can get hot. So unfortunately, because of this form factor, it can't cool down the way that other MacBooks can. So yes, heat can be an issue, but when it comes to web browsing or word processing or even light Photoshopping, it's not going to be a problem for you. Now, the final thing that I want to talk about with the MacBook Air M2 is the price point. So this computer starts at a retail price of $1,199 for the base model of the computer, which, let's be honest, is not the one that you should grab. And the reason for that is that the base model is significantly slower than the slightly higher end model, which comes in at a retail price of $1,499. So for $1,199, the base model comes with an 8-core CPU and an 8-core GPU. It comes with 8 gigabytes of RAM and 256 gigabytes of solid-state storage. Again, unless you're strapped for cash, I don't think you should get the base model of the M2 MacBook Air. If anything, grab last year's M1 MacBook Air with better specs for a better price. They raise the retail price of these computers, unfortunately, not by a huge amount, but enough to be kind of annoying. The slightly higher end version, which is a version that we have right here, comes in at a retail price of $1,499. It's got an 8-core CPU, a 10-core GPU, 8 gigabytes of RAM, and 512 gigabytes of solid-state storage. Now, obviously, Apple does give you the option to upgrade this computer on their website for more money. I think in a lot of cases, if you're spending like $500 to $1,000 extra to upgrade this computer, just get the MacBook Pro. Even the base model of that computer is more capable than the MacBook Air when you're speccing them out around the same price, so I definitely go that way. In my opinion, the $1,499 version is kind of the sweet spot. That's just my opinion though. It really depends on what your needs are, and you should grab whatever your needs require. But that's why I grabbed this version, because I felt like the value was best at that price point. So, is the 2022 M2 MacBook Air worth it? In my opinion, if you're looking for a do-everything computer that's very capable and comes in at a pretty reasonable price, I think the M2 MacBook Air is absolutely worth it. Personally, I love the redesign of this computer. I already love the form factor. The fact that they added a new screen with the notch, I'm definitely into. Obviously, not really into the notch, more into the screen itself and the fact that it's larger. And the portability of this computer is insane. It's absolutely crazy, the fact that you could literally almost even stick this in your back pocket if you wanted to. You can't, but it's close if you have really big back pockets. After using this device for 2 weeks, I'm in love with it and I would absolutely recommend it. The only reason I don't use a MacBook Air on a regular basis is because I edit videos on my laptop and this just can't do that. A MacBook Pro can do that. But if I could, I really would genuinely consider switching to the MacBook Air because it's an excellent laptop. But that pretty much wraps up the video for today. Now, I would love to know your thoughts on the M2 MacBook Air and whether you own one, whether you want one, or whether you just don't care. So make sure to let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't yet, and I'll see you all in the next one.